Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight, it's Spring Creek flies and leaders. We'll start off with a No Hackle, then a ParaGlen, simple Spring Creek leaders, and Paul from Australia will share a Camo leader with us. I'm Al Beatty from Boise, Idaho, and you are?
Gretchen Beatty from Boise, Idaho.
It's
we
amazing.
live together, huh?
The same place. I get to live with you, too. That's really lucky for me.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
All right. We've got the recipe up for the No Hackle that Eric will be starting with us. Eric Roston is from Deleware, Ohio, where he enjoys his retirement from a career as a musician. If he's like us, Eric's busier now than he was when he was working. He grew up fishing and tying flies for trout in the Adirondack Mountains. He learned to tie from library books, emulating the Catskill style flies of Fran Bedders. He is mostly a dry fly purist, preferring to offer his patterns in a Spring Creek environment on waters like the Henry's Fork in Idaho or Penns Creek in the east. He has contributed articles to Fly Anglers Online, been featured in Volume 3 of the British book Fly Tyers of the World, and is currently a contributing author to Fly Tyer magazine. Tonight, he has agreed to tie a No Hackle dry fly. Eric, the vice is yours.
This is one of my all-time favorite dry flies, and I always seem to wind up fishing this when none of the other done patterns are working. It's weird. It's a fly of last resort for me, and it comes through all the time. It comes from Doug Swisher and Carl Richards' 1974 book, Selective Trout. And trout certainly have gotten more and more selective as time has gone on. Before I start tying, I want to show you a few aspects of the fly. These are flies I've done that panned out, and sometimes they don't, but we'll see how it goes tonight. The original Swisher Richards had a more laid back wing, but when Renee Harrop and Mike Lawson got a hold of the fly at Henry's Fork, they began to tie it with a more upright wing. And here's the near wing. And this is the far wing. And this is a tough look to get on the far wing, where the lower edge of the wing extends down below the body. But that's always my goal. And sometimes I achieve it. Here's the fly from the bottom. And this fly was tied using Harrop's dubbing, which is a very bulky dubbing that traps a lot of air. The top view here demonstrates the split tail, and the bigger a split you can get, the better. This is hackle. I have my own way of splitting the tail that I'll demonstrate. And here it is from the front. I'm going to start the thread. And by the way, the thread is important, I think. Renee Harrop for sure uses Uni 8/0 thread, and that's the thread I like to use too. And I've tried other threads, and it may be psychological, but I don't think they work as well. So I'm just going to start it a little behind the eye. And the way I'm going to split this tail, I'm going to leave it long tag end on the thread. Harrop and Lawson do a dubbing ball at the back to split the hackle. I've got my own method that I'll show you. I'm doing X wraps, about 5 sets to make a small thread ball. And you have to do this. You have to have that ball. I was demonstrating this at a show once, and for some reason lost my mind and didn't put the thread ball on. Well, that doesn't work, as I found out. I'm going to use microfibbits on this one. And the vast majority of the ones that I tie regularly, I use microfibbits, not hackle. But there are legions of people that wouldn't have it any other way. that insist on hackle. I like microfibbets. In my mind, they float a little better because of their stiffness. Now, I'll use Coq de Leon if I'm using. I want this tail to be about shank length. I'm going to hold it right here at this thread bump and roll it up on top. Then I'm going to wind about halfway back. And this is a standard tail splitting technique, but I change it up a little bit. I'll show you. You split the fibers into 2 and 2. And typically, when this technique is used, a lot of people just tie it down on top. I don't. I angle it down on my side of the hook. Catch it with a turn. Now the near hackle fibers are angling down. Thread torque will bring them back up. So I'm going to hold the far tails in place. And thread torque will bring them down. And then as I get to the back, I'm going to use side-to-side pressure. And I get a nice split. And I want at least 60 degrees, ideally maybe 90.
Eric, I don't know about everybody else, but I just had an aha moment.
Well, that's good. Now, I like to take the thread all the way to the eye and then count turns back. In this case, this is a size 14. We'll call this a flav. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 turns back. Should put me at about the 30% mark on the hook. And the camera's at an angle, so it's hard to see, but this is about 30%. Maybe I could go one more. And I do that so that I do it that way so that I get consistency where the thread is placed. I'm not guessing. Now, let me show you. These are mallard quills, a left and a right. The left is on the left, and the bulk of the longest fibers are on the left. The right is on the right, and the longest fibers are on the right. And I'm going to cut slips that look like this, one from each. And then we're going to put them together to form the wings. The left will make up the near wing. So here's the left. You want to use, there's some flimsy fibers down at the bottom. You want to use this middle third of the feather. Hard to see here. When you get up in here, you don't have enough strand length, and you get a lot of splitting too. You see this line here? From here to here is what's usable. Well, it gets pretty short. So maybe you save that for your 22s. I've never tied a 22. I got to tell you. Typical size I do in these is 18. Now I've just cut a slip, and I always measure it against the shank. And this is about, well, it's almost a shank length wide. On a 14, I might actually want a little less than that. Probably strip out a little bit, but let me cut the right next. I've cut it. I've put the two slips together. One's way too wide. I'm going to make them about equal, and I typically do this on my thigh, so it's hard to show, but I'm just evening them up. All right. Now I hold them in a pinch, like so, and straddle the hook. And this is the hard part of the fly. What I'm going to do is, all I'm going to do is bind this down with turns, but the first 2 turns are going to be very horizontal. In other words, instead of going like this, they're going to go more like this. And I'll show you how that's done. So I'll just barely get the eye sticking out. I'm catching this with my thumb, the thread with my thumb, so it stays there. Catching it on the far side of the hook with my index finger a little bit. And then I'm tapping twice on the far side, twice on the near side, and twice up front with very light tension. Then I do that same thing again. Then I'll take just 4 standard wraps, pretty tight wraps. Now here's where we take stock. This far wing has pulled under the shank just a touch. I may still be able to work with it, but you don't want it to do that. I'm going to go ahead and try to work with it anyway. Next thing we want to do is separate these wings out. A lot. Mike Lawson takes his thumb and jams it in there. I've always been afraid to do that. There's a little collar that you can make by taking some of the remaining butts, and we want to take a turn behind that collar. Every wrap we're going to do from here on is going to be, other than the dubbing, is going to be very diagonal. The first thing we're going to do is go under the near wing and bring it forward slightly without catching the tail. Okay, so my thread is now on the far side of the hook. I'm going to take another turn there. What I've got going here, I call this the Dumbo ears effect. It's this nice concave look on a very upright wing. I like a very upright wing because I can see it on the water. The original Swisher Richards Sidewinder style, very hard to see. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the far wing. I've got a split, but we won't panic. If you move it too far forward, like I did, it can split on you. Now right from here, I'm going to take a super diagonal wrap because I want to work this thread back almost to the thread bump, but not quite. I'm going to use Superfine on this particular one. Mike Lawson uses Superfine. And normally, if I'm using Superfine, I want the thread to look like fuzzy thread when I'm done dubbing. Not so with this fly. I want this to be a little bulkier. And I'll take some dubbing out, and I'll pull a small amount out, and then I'll take half of that. And I do about 4 sets of these. Now, if you want to be Renee Harrop, you do it left-handed, like that. What I did there is I went back to the thread ball, and from here on, I try to avoid the wings. I'm wrapping the dubbing forward. Let me see if I can show that. in almost a figure-8 style of wrap. I want to get it to where that far wing just has barely moved. And then I take a very diagonal wrap to just behind the eye, wrap back. You want a big thorax with this fly. It's all about flotation. The far wing is not one of my best, but the beauty of this fly is if you don't nail it, the fly will still fish and catch fish like crazy.
I see that Fred has a question for you.
The question I had is, why not dub the abdomen before you set the wings?
Why not?
Yeah.
Or, you know, when I first started tying these, I tried that. I've seen David McPhail do it and sort of pull it off. But Mike Lawson says there's no way you can possibly tie the fly that way. So that may be crap. I don't know. But that's what Mike Lawson says. So I don't do it that way.
Okay.
And Mike Lawson and Renee Harrop both tie this fly fabulously. I mean, they are for my money, the authorities. Well, good luck with this. And if you decide you want to jump into this one, start with 10 pairs of mallard wings. That's what it's going to take to get any kind of consistency at all. And I had a guy respond when I said that online and responded, 10 is not nearly enough. So anyway, but it's worth it. It's a great fly.
Eric, this is John Kraft. Do you use the primary or secondary feathers?
I only use the primaries, and I don't use the very first one. I take that off and throw it out. It's usually it's not wide enough. It's very skinny. It's very brittle. So don't use the very top feather, but then use the next, I think it's about the next 5 down will work. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention.
What we're going to be tying is, it's almost so easy that I'm ashamed to show it to you. But here's the recipe. It's a hook, thread, and 2 materials. The hook is a dry fly. You pick the size that you want. The thread is the color to match the body. We're going to furl some poly yarn. The wing is poly yarn also, as is the body. And the hackle is any color that you want it to be. And of course, the head is whatever thread that you happen to use. Take a look at the materials, see how they go together. As you can see, I'll grab my thread and put it over there at the vise. We've already got the hooks over there. And I have my poly yarn ready to go on, and I split the strand in half. And you can see that I've got just a long electronics test clip that I bought online. And it makes it easy to furl with. I particularly like that for furling. So I'll move over to the vise that it would be any good. Anyway, so I just left that fly lay aside in the tying room. And let's fast forward here a few months. We're coming up on our first wedding anniversary, living in our new home in Bozeman. And Bob Auger was the river keeper for Depew Spring Creek over in Livingston, Montana. Day before our wedding anniversary, the phone rings. That's back when we talked on telephones instead of using them to text message and stuff like that. Anyway, and he says, I understand it's your wedding anniversary tomorrow. I've got a spare rod on the creek. Would you and Gretchen like to have it as your wedding anniversary present? I said, we sure would. The first fly that we took out to give a test drive was the ParaGlen. You can see here now that as we've been going along here, I've been furling the body. Let me just Take that off. All right, good. Now I'm going to, anyway, after about 5 or 6 fish on different things, Gretchen and I were doing pretty good. I said, we ought to try the ParaGlen. I mean, just so we can say we try it, we'll let it die a natural death and leave the darn thing alone. Well, it worked. It worked so good that it's been in our fly boxes ever since. Now, we tried to get commercial tires and fly shops and everything interested in, and I can tell you right now, there's no way anybody is going to be interested in this. Now, I'm tying this in a size 12, but you can tie it in anything. We like to tie it on a little bit larger scud hook and then tie it small using the wider gap of the scud hook to make hooking the fish easier with the way the hackle goes on. You're going to see what that is here in just a minute. I've got one right here that's got to go away, but you can probably start to kind of get the idea how this is going to be a parachute. Let me slip over here to get my materials and get my hackle. I've got some hackle already picked out here that the grizzly, I'll just take them over here to the vise and I'll pull one out. Let's grab this guy right here. He's nice and long, gives me a lot to play with. All right, I'll just tie the feather on right there. Now, if you want, you can just leave the stem stick up into the wing. It don't make any difference, but I'm not going to do that. Now, I'm just going to make a couple of turns behind the body, and then the rest are going to be working my way forward. Now, what's interesting is this fly really does, especially in the smaller sizes, when you tie it in 16, 18s, and 20s, as I said, you can use a larger hook and still have a smaller fly and have enough of a gap that you're not blocking out the hooking capability caused by this crazy hackle setup. Anyway, so now I'll just go ahead and take a couple of wraps there. And I'll do a half hitch, followed by another. And now we're going to do a whip finish with the same tool. If you let those strands come off of the tool loose so they fall over, it makes a whip finish. If you pull it off tight, it makes a 2-turn jam knot. Anyway, so now we have a fly that is not a parachute, but it fishes like a parachute. Let me get this all squared away here. And there it is. Now there's another version that we tie. That's the one I showed you just a minute ago. And what I do sometimes is we'll add a glass bead on the underside. And that has proven very attractive to the fish. Either version works just fine. And it's really great for fishing a dropper, obviously, the way it's oriented in the water. But anyway, as I said, it's so simple, I'm almost ashamed to show it to you, but that's the ParaGlen. Now, do we have any questions? You gotta leave that in the bite. Before we share our second furled method of leaders, let me introduce Paul Fedeles. Paul is from Port Macquarie, New South Wales, Australia, where he enjoys his retirement from a career in high school sports coaching and teaching. He is an ROTC graduate from Colorado State University. After college, he was commissioned in the U.S. Marine Corps as an infantry officer. He was discharged in 1972 as a captain with 2 Combat Valor Awards and a Combat Action Ribbon earned in Vietnam. In 1973, he immigrated to Australia to become a sports coach. While coaching at Barker College, a private high school, his team racked up 376 wins, 68 of which were consecutive. He earned numerous coaching awards, including New South Wales ABC Schools Coach of the Year. He started tying flies and fishing in 2008 and is a member of the Sydney Fly Rodders, Hastings Fly Fishers Club, and Coffs Coast Fishing Club. Tonight, Paul will briefly discuss the camouflage furled leader he makes using embroidery thread. A video of his furling method is posted on our Facebook page, Gretchen-Al Beatty. Paul, it's all yours.
You want to put that picture up?
I surely will. Let's see what's going on.
Okay.
Just a minute.
I've got the setup for this on the internet, so that wasn't anything that I did great. I usually fish with a five weight triangle taper line, and Philip Weigel, one of the famous people here in Australia, I spent days with him, and he more or less convinced me that you never use less than a 6-pound tippet, so that you don't get broken off by a great fish of the, the fish of a lifetime. And so I started to make the furled leaders, but the mono that I tried was too thick and too stiff. So then I thought, you're a fly tying thread, but that's too expensive. So I ended up buying some embroidery thread, which is in here in Australia, which would be more. It was $8.50 for 1,000 meters. And
and there's what your leaders look like. We've got it up on screen right now, Paul.
And Paul, that's, to be specific, that is machine embroidery thread,
yeah,
correct?
yeah. Well, if you look at the go back to the other picture, you see all the different. There's 36 colors, so you can make whatever colors. I just had fun making them. I ended up making about 30 and give them away. I think I only have about 5 now. I gave one of the last ones I had to Robin the other day. When you make them, they're really strong. And so you get about a 6-foot leader, and it'll turn 10-foot a tippet over really easy. It works like a sink tip. They sink. If you want them to float, you actually have to soak it in Scotch Guard till it's soaking wet and hanging up to dry, and then you got to dress it before you use it to make it to float. But I use it as a sink tip.
Oh, a sink tip, yeah, right.
Okay, and then that's the completed leader. And again, if anyone is interested, they can check out our website, or they can go to Gretchen-Al Beatty on Facebook, and there it is at the bottom. That's our Facebook address. We're getting ready to furl the leader here. First off, let me get some tools. This is a weight that I'm going to need, and it's just a hook of wire on a stem from a disassembled vise. I'll set that down, and then I have a hook right here stuck into just a regular vise. I normally do this on 2 tables that are they're exactly 9.5 foot apart. And why is that? Because I can make the fold over, and my reach is almost 5 foot. I give myself a little bit of leeway and do 9.5 foot apart, and you'll see what that all means here in just a minute. Now I'm going to lay the weight down here so I don't misplace it. Put that over here. Let me get my electric drill. And the electric drill also has a hook on it. There it is. And that's what we're going to use to do the leader. Now I'm going to start. This particular leader is one that I call a 321 leader, and you'll see why here in a minute, why it's got such a and I'll just hook this right over that hook that's in the drill, and I'll cut off the waste. You don't want that flopping around out there. You find that becomes a real problem. Now, I'm going to take this monofilament, take a loop around the hook, come back to the drill, take a loop around the hook again, and then I'm going to go up to the drill. Up
to the vise.
That's the vise I've got. That's the third strand, and that's why it's called a 321 or a 321 leader. This particular section of the leader is going to be 3 strands, which will be furled and folded over, which actually becomes 6, but it starts out as 3. And I'm just tying it off right there at the vise. Okay, I don't know about your drills, but mine have a couple of speeds, and I'm going to put it on high speed to get started. And then as it gets tighter, I'll slow it down. Okay, I don't want to break it. It's just about as tight as I want it to be. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my weight and just hang it on that strand. What that does is keeps it under tension, even though I may jiggle around a little bit, it won't get all tangled around itself. And then I'll bend it over, come up here, grab the one off of the hook up here, pull it off, and let it spin the furl. Okay, now we've got a loop at this section here. Would you hold that for me, sweetheart? Let me get you can see all I'm doing is keeping my loop from coming apart or getting tangled, using a clip to hold it. Now on the other side, this is going to be the butt end that goes to the fly line or to whatever your loop is on the fly line. And I'm going to do a perfection loop on that end. Twist to the back and a loop. Come to the front, then to the back with another loop. Pull across between the two and pull the front one through the back one. And what we end up with is a perfection loop that I'm just going to cut off all the waste here. All right, I'll just throw that away. If you'll just hang that over there on one of those hooks, Gretchen, and I'll get it from you here in just a minute. Okay, let's do the number 2 part of the furled leader.
It's doing okay.
I can't tell. Can you see?
Yeah, it is. It's fine.
The picture looks like it's good now.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I don't know what the heck happened, but anyway, just set that aside. Now we'll spin this one up. All right, we'll spin that up. I can feel that starting to pull my drill in that direction. So it's probably a good time to quit before I break everything. So remember, you hang the weight so that you can have a little bit of slack in it and have it not get away from you. Reach up here, pull it off of that one. And we're just gonna let it twist and furl. All righty. Now, would you hand me the other one there, please, sweetheart? Okay. Now we're just going to put these 2 loops together. And you can see I'm just kind of going to put these together loop to loop. I'll just fold this back over, push it up through. Tighten those up, and sweetie, if you'll hang on to that, we'll make the last one. Now I'm just going to reach up here with this loop and hook it over here on the far end, and then bring the spool back to the drill. Well, that's what happens. Now, we may as well talk about this right now. Thank God I didn't have it all spun up. I want you to notice that my hook came out of the drill. And even though I had tape on it, they'll start working their way loose. So would have been a real mess had it been furled when that happened. So the gods are smiling on me tonight. Now we're going to spin this single up, and I'll tell you what, the single takes quite a bit of time. It's also very easy to break, just as a word of caution. Okay, now let me hang the weight over this. And we'll let it twist. is its I call it stretchability. But anyway, let me just lay these two together and just do a double surgeon's knot like we did last week.
Down lower.
Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I've laid the two ends together. Take a loop around. There we go. And I'll take one more loop around and get the double surgeon's knot. Now we'll start to tighten it up. Moisten the loop. And now I'll stop and I'll pull with the long strands first. Then I'll switch to the shorter ones to tighten this up in stages.
Oh, I'm disappointed, Al. I wanted to see you tie a blood knot on camera.
I can do that if you want, but I particularly like this one because what we talked about last week, if you recall, was taking these knots and coating them with the UV glue. I'm not going to do that tonight because you all know really well that I never use glue around a camera. Guides better. Okay, now starting here at the wide end, we've got the loop, the butt section. We've right here is the loop to the middle section. Here is the knot, putting the tip section and the middle section together. And that brings us up to the loop at this section. Now, Robin, you asked a really good question. And I wanted to show you that this has got a lot of stretch to it. You see how that thing, you can see it stretching and twisting. Yes. And what that does, just off of some I'm using 4-pound Maxima. Actually, I would probably use something a lot lighter, but this shows up just a little bit better on the camera. And all we're doing is showing you how to go out and do your own thing. Okay, set this over here. Now, the way we furled last week, if you recall, I'll see if I can do it up here. I'll start here and then we'll move over to the vice camera. Remember you formed a loop and you laid the top over the bottom to form the Y. And then you let your hands divide the two and you started twisting. Continue that twisting process. Now I want this loop here to be smaller. So I'm going to pull the top strand, and then I'm going to pull the bottom strand until I get that loop down just about where I want it. And now I'll start furling again. Just like we did last week, I'm actually furling my connection for my tippet. And it also provides just a little bit better energy transfer on laying a fly out on the water. Okay, and I'm just going to do another double surgeons to tie this off so it doesn't come apart. Alrighty, now I'll just get my scissors out here and cut that off. Don't cut the wrong one. Now I'll loop it to the end of the other one. Okay, now I'll pull those together, and now I've added my tippet material with just a short section of furling, bringing it down into the tippet. And there you have a 321 leader with the tippet tied on. Now I know that was probably a little bit confusing, but I hope you got the general idea of how we put it together. I would really like to be able to do this where you can see what I'm actually doing when I set up to do it, when I've got the room and I don't have to work within the confines of a camera. But cameras are what they are and Zoom is what it is.
And we'll have a tip.
Oh, we got a tip. Oh, I got a tip for you. Oh boy, would you? Oh, I'll get it in just a minute.
I'll get it. What do you want?
Well, it's over there, that mud flap.
Oh,
The mud, yeah.
oh, here. undo this.
Okay, undo that. You get the mud flap and then I'll show them how to use it. What we're going to talk about is on the tip is melting monofilament eyes. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever had any trouble melting the darn things, but I sure have, especially if it's just plain ordinary monofilament. Let me hook you up here. We finally ran across a really great product for melting monofilament eyes. They come out perfect every time. They're black. It's just absolutely incredible. And I've got my flame tool here. And I've got a piece of that monofilament, whatever you call it, off of that mud guard. Now this makes the best darn eyes. Now you watch this. What I like about it is it's consistently round. And how many of you have made your monofilament eyes and had the darn things droop? You don't need to say yay or nay. I know you have. If you use regular monofilament, I don't know. I can't tell you how many I've thrown away that they drooped on me. But anyway, it's some of the best stuff that there is. And I've got this whole big thing here. If you've got a trucking company in your area, I would suggest that you go by and see what they got in their dumpster. I would never tell you to go dumpster diving. Al never said that, but you might find out if they got some of this kind of stuff. You can also check. I see push brooms sometimes have some bristles on them that look like this. Give that a try. But these are incredible. And if you can't find it in your area, you can get a hold of me and I'll send you, for the $5 for shipping for a fistful of them. Oh, and you guys in Australia, I just found out today that I can get my package coming your way now that the country has opened up a little bit. So I'll slip a few of these in there for you too, so you can play with them down there.
Love to play with it. Thank you very much. I was going to go around with some scissors to a trucking company and slip behind a truck and go snip, snip.
Okay, very good. Anyhow, any other questions? And that's our tip. We'll see you next week for a touch of magic.